Okay, so been a few days. I've been doing some work last few days. I haven't put a video up. We just got the shop kind of prepped and ready, and we got the E60 in here, and we're ready for the engine swap. We're gonna try to get it out. Now there's a few things we have to go over before we start. We have the other engine in here. Everything is here except for the oil pan gasket for this engine. So all the parts ordered in the last video, everything is here. But for some reason FedEx fumbled that oil pan gasket, and that's pretty big necessity. So the plan is, I don't think we have enough room in here. We got some shells built, and I need to get some more pegboard and pegboard all this. And we got all of our totes up out of the way. We use those 6-inch timber screws to mount all this. We use brackets and everything. Everything should be good. But we have little pieces of pegboard stuck behind there. In case you're wondering, people's gonna ask. And what that does, that allowed me to cut the angles right and shim them right. So when I put the new pegboard in, I'll loosen that screw and slip that out and put the pegboard behind it. And we got some new LED lights. You can probably barely see them. There's one there. There's one right here. I figure those will come in handy. Once we need to vacuum stuff out, we can flip the light in over here. We have the other light is over there. And come along pretty nicely. Got a lot more room in here. However, I don't think we have enough room to pull the whole cradle out. We only have about 6 foot between here and the workbench. And so what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and pull the front bumper, and we'll pull the headlights out. We'll get the front end, everything out the front here. We'll pull the radiator, and that'll give us enough room to take this out the top. It'll have to come forward a little bit so we can take it right out. And that'll allow me to get to everything else, look at everything. I can see somebody's got some regular hose clamps on some of this stuff. We'll just have to get in here big time and sort it all out. So I guess what we're gonna do right now, first thing, is pull this bumper off. And I think there's a wasp nest behind that headlight, so that should be interesting. And I guess after we pull the bumper off, we'll get the radiator drained. We'll drain the oil. Just kind of get everything prepped up and ready. We'll pull the air box, the vanity cover, all that stuff's already off. And you know, we'll go ahead and drain the power steering fluid. Just try to get everything prepped up and ready. Now, hopefully this will allow me to not have to let the Freon out, and I could just set the compressor off to the side, the AC compressor, and we'll get her all done. We'll have to pull a lot of stuff out. Like probably this will have to go, and you know, just the cowling's already out, so that's already a big plus. So we'll take the ECU cover off, lay all the wires from the ECU over onto the car. It shouldn't be that bad, really. So we'll just start working on it and see how we go here. Okay, so here's where we're at with it, and it's the next morning, by the way. I did quite a bit last night. I figured out we had to pull the AC line, so I kind of got up this morning and let that out, put all the fans on in here, and that worked out good. So anyhow, and by the way, in case you're wondering, we use just a regular 134A hose so we could actually direct it into a rag so it didn't get on anything. It worked out real nice. Anyhow, here we are. So we have the radiator drained. We have our drain pan right there. We have the transmission cooler on this one is mounted to the condenser, so we took the snap lock lines off of that, drained that out. There's no problem with that. That's all good. The AC, these two lines here where they bolt on to the condenser, they were seized on there. It has like a little peg that sticks up, and they were seized in place. Put a WD-40 in there, could not get it off. Tried for burned almost a whole hour on that. And we ended up using the air hammer to get in the gap very gently, and that vibration is the only thing that would get it off, and it took it right off within seconds. So, a few things I could tell you right now is, let me get in here, I don't have my right tripod, we'll just have to make do with this one. The belt, this thing hasn't run in a very long time. The belt is like rusted to the pulleys. That's not gonna make too much difference though. And then our transmission cooler, which is right there, where that pushes into the coolant on the bottom of the radiator, that was hard to get off because, you know, it was kind of crispy. So just to recap, this is not the way you're supposed to do this. You're supposed to pull the whole cradle out. We don't have enough room here to easily pull the whole cradle out. So in theory, the chain of events that are going to take place here is pull the intake manifold off, so we get to the starter, the bell housing bolts, all that stuff. We'll have to pull each wheel off, and we'll have to slide the CV axles out to free that up. We'll take the front drive shaft out because that is bolted to the diff, to the oil pan. This is an all-wheel drive car. A two-wheel drive car, this is tremendously easier. The bad problem with anything that's all-wheel drive, there's two differentials, two drive shafts, transfer case, a whole bunch of electronics, a whole bunch of hassle. All-wheel drive is nice for in Missouri that one day a year it snows, maybe wet pavement. The rest of the time it's a freaking nightmare. So if you live up north, maybe all drive is a necessity, but you are going to have to do a lot more maintenance on anything X-Drive, any of the older XI stuff. It's just the way it is. So that shouldn't really take that long. We're pretty much done here in the front at this point. We're going to get the intake manifold off. After we do that, we're going to jack it up. We could then get the bell housing bolts. We could get all the torque converter bolts out. And like I said, it really will go very quickly. I did notice on this 5 Series they have the oil cooler up here, kind of like a N54 has, something similar, where the 3 Series engine does not have that. It shouldn't make any difference, so I should be able to switch the whole housing out. And I luckily bought a new gasket for that. There's a few things though. The transmission fluid that came out of the transmission cooler, or the lines that go to it, is pretty freaking nasty. I'm sorry, let me back that up. That was actually the power steering cooler that I took off. So yeah, so somebody had transmission fluid in the power steering. That was fine on the old cars. That might work on this one, but this takes that CHF stuff. We bought a new filter, everything new. We drained that. That was ugly. While we're up here, we're going to have to pull the transmission lines off anyway because they're bolted to the side of the engine. I don't think I can leave those in place. I kind of want to drain the transmission cooler anyway and check the fluid in there. We're going to change the fluid no matter what in the filter and the transmission. But if I could drain everything up here while we're all apart and drain all the lines out, I feel like I get a lot more of the old fluid out that way. So maybe we'll do that. But I'd like to be able to start it up with old fluid in it, just to kind of see what the situation is. I don't want to change the fluid in the transmission. That could be bad. Then you burn all that money doing that. So other than that, the rest of the front end, the bumper is laying right there. We're going to have to put that somewhere else besides there. And a few other pieces with a little 1/4-inch drive impact. The whole front end was off, and hell, man, 15-20 minutes, the whole front end was off. Everything except for the condenser. And it was very, very, very super easy. And if you ever get one of these that's wrecked, there is bolt-on stubs to the front of that. So, you know, they only go back about 8 inches, but still, if the bumper's all bent up, that doesn't mean that the frame's jacked up on these at all. And that is aluminum, so that's going to bend a lot easier than the steel that's behind it. So maybe that's takes place of the bumper shocks, the old style bumper shocks, right? Okay, well, let's keep moving here. Alright, so we got a little different light set up here. I was getting sick of not having any light. Can't see what the hell I was doing. Anyway, we got the skid plate out. I noticed those thrust arms for the front wheels might be kind of iffy. I'm looking at some different ones of those. I didn't realize on these E60s, all drive E60s, how tight that water pump is. That's much worse than the 3 Series we just did the pump on. Yeah, those thrust arm bushings are bad. Just see that right now. You can see, I don't know. I mean, it looks like it's ripping out from around. I don't know if you could even see it on camera or not. Ripping out from around where the rubber meets the metal, and I could take them and easily turn them. So I'd say it's gonna be thrust arms. We'll just add that to the scary, the current scary ongoing list of things to buy for this thing. But yeah, the water pump on this would be a real pain in the butt. You cannot get to it at all from the bottom. That subframe is completely covering up all the hoses and everything under there. If you can see that, I don't really know. We'll see in the editing. And so yeah, for us it's not a big deal, but definitely if I didn't buy that pump, the new pump, we'd be doing this down the road. That'd be a whole bunch of not fun. So yeah, I did not buy the pulleys. I forgot to test those. Hopefully between this car and another car we have a good set. That's not hard to change, you know, when it's back together. And I did not get the set that has the other gasket for this, for the cooler. But you know, that's super easy to do if we have to do it later on. We'll look at it. We'll have enough time to go and order one for it and do it. So yeah, so far everything's going great. I just got the car jacked up in the air. We're gonna start pulling this intake manifold off. I just drained all the fluids, drained the oil, drained the front diff, and we might actually have to let it back down. It's a little too tall for me to reach, but we're gonna pull the air box out. I'm hoping when I pull the air box I could just stand right here, you know, stand like right there and just work on it, and it should be real easy. Once you get the intake manifold off, that kind of opens everything up and makes everything much easier. We do need to drain that water pump before you pull that off, though. I'll try to get a hose off of it and drain. There'll be some coolant sitting in that. But other than that, we're rolling right along. Overall, this has not been a bad job so far. As long as the CV axles come out, which I don't see why they wouldn't, and they're not seizing the hubs or something cool like that, this should be a pretty easy swap. I think what we're going to do, though, and a lot of the reason why we did it like this also, is we're going to try to get the engine out of this car. Maybe we'll push it out, clean the engine bay up, hit it with some degreaser and stuff. And then we'll have both engines in here where we can swap parts, whatever we need, and we'll put everything on the new one. And once you get that in, we can just roll this thing back in and drop it back in. That sounds awesome. Probably won't work like that, but we'll see. Okay, so our engine may not be as virgin, if you will, as we thought it was. Somebody's had the intake manifold off before. Maybe to change the starter. The starter looks questionable. I can't read. No, it's a BMW starter, so probably not that. Had some tape here on the alternator right there. That's definitely not factory. The wiring harness that bolts the bottom of the intake was not bolted up, and I'm not really sure. I mean, hard freaking telling, right? But the intake is full of oil, which, I mean, the cylinder head is like completely freaking destroyed, so that's possible. But that, by taking the intake off, that opens everything up, and that allows us to get to the starter real easy. Allows us to get to pretty much all the transmission bolts. We get to 3/4 of them up here. Have to slide underneath and get to 1 or 2 on the bottom. Actually, I think there's 3 across the bottom on this one, and 1 on the passenger side. And it shouldn't be that bad. Looking underneath of it, it's easy access for the torque converter bolts. We'll leave that with the transmission. We'll probably take it out and dump it out and put fresh fluid in that, so when we change it, we get as much fluid as we possibly can. I mean, for the most part, it looks pretty much untouched, you might say. And it's really not that much more stuff, and this thing will be ready to pull. So, like I said, we're just trying to get all the bolts out, everything off of it. We need to pull that coolant container off next, and take the exhaust, the collector bolts. Then we'll have to get all this garbage over here. We'll put that bumper outside and secure it, the crash bar, all this throttle body and air box, all that crap. We'll try to throw that in the trunk, but I know the trunk is full of junk. The trunk's full of junk in this thing, so we'll have to throw all that out. But you can see all the aluminum is oxidizing, and actually on this one the block is magnesium. It's also oxidizing. But the transmission, if you can see down there, the transmission looks freaking like it's been the bottom of the ocean, which is kind of normal for stuff sitting around. So let's kind of keep plugging away at her here, and see how it all works out. Like I said, at the very end, we're going to take that top off that box to the ECU and just fold the wires over. I mean, we could probably just take it off right here, right, as we got the intake off, but we'll see what's easier. I don't know. Okay, so we're knocking it right out. We got the starter out. It is the original starter, so we probably won't be using that again. Yeah, just kind of pulling everything out. Pull the front drive shaft out. The front drive shaft, yeah, that's probably not going to be okay. Here's the front U-joint. Front U-joint moves perfectly. It's not notchy. The back U-joint, which is always when it goes bad, is actually frozen up. I can't even move it. There's like a bunch of play in it. That's not going to work. We still have the front drive shaft in the E90 here. It was no better. It was about the same difference. And you can see it has the classic rusty dust, as we like to call it, and it's all in around that joint, coming off that joint. So that, my friends, needs to be replaced. Those are like $100 for a used one, probably $1,000 for a new one. So we'll roll the dice and try to get a good used one in. I'm not sure what that's from. Probably in this car's case, probably freaking flooring it and turning the wheel and cutting donuts or whatever he was doing. God only knows what he's doing. Judging by the look of the tires on it, he's doing a little bit of everything. Probably meth too. But anyway, so yeah, I don't really see too much of anything else wrong. When we pulled the skid plate out, it wasn't full of bolts. It seemed like it was all pretty good shape. Spinning back around here. So all the coolant lines are done. We still need to unhook 2 lines that go to the heater core just so it separates from the engine. Other than that, up here we're pretty much good to go. We're down to belt housing bolts, torque converter bolts, and unplug the ECU and fold the wires over. And I undid the AC pump lines up here. I laid those over, taped all this other stuff up. The little line came off the pump and off the condenser. If I had known that, I left it on the condenser. But that's just kind of the way stuff works out. Overall, it's very easy. And having a car that nobody's messed with everything on it makes it a lot easier to handle. So, I guess at this point, we need to get that stuff taken care of. Pull the 2 nuts off the engine mount, 1 on each side, and we might be ready to pull it out. But it's not going to happen today because I have to leave here shortly. I need to go to the Walmart, and yikes, all kinds of goo over this thing. I need to go to the Walmart and need to get some more batteries for my headlamps. I need to get a few other things, and tomorrow, maybe, if we get the shock cleaned out, we can hook the cherry picker to this thing and lift it out, and at least get that far. And then we'll push the car out and so forth. But that's going to be it, guys. I might work another 30 minutes on it, taking bell housing bolts out. That's going to be all for today's video. We'll call this part 1 of the Copart E60 engine removal.